Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka Mono Bluetron, back again with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. So today we're playing an actually pretty interesting deck that must have been designed by the guy at Konami who was responsible for Ritual Beasts. I'm speaking, of course, of Metaphys, a sweet series of cards that interact with the Banished Zone in a way no deck except RB and Cosmo really have yet. With a powerful field spell and a suite of monsters with every possible effect under the sun, I am super excited to dive into this one. So, let's jump into Deck Edit and see what we're playing. So here's the list. Now, I'm sure you have many questions, not the least of which is, holy hell, is that actually Card of Sanctity? Now, don't worry. As always, I will give you a little bit of insight into the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and as always, the card by card. So firstly, Metaphys is an archetype of monsters that I think are supposed to represent dead or spiritual versions of boss monsters that really never took off. So far, they've released Metaphys Armed Dragon, Daedalus, Horus, Nephthys, Tyrant Dragon, and Ragnarok. Now, I will take any excuse to play any version of Sacred Phoenix, so I am jumping at this chance. The deck they're meant to be a part of makes use of the Banished Zone the same way that meta strategies make use of the Graveyard as a bit of a second hand. Almost all of them have effects that trigger the standby phase after they are banished, special summoning Metaphys cards from hand, banishing others, and most importantly, adding cards from your deck to your hand. Because of that last one, their support is all searchable, and the continuous traps and field spell protect your guys and banish your opponent's cards. It's an exciting deck that is only going to get better as they reveal more support, so I have thrown together this list that is playing all that we have so far. This deck is designed to mitigate what I believe is the single weakness of the strategy at this point in time. It is really hard to get Metaphys cards from your hand and deck to your Banished Zone. Now, I toyed with a couple of different builds designed to make use of Fairy Tale Snow, but I found it to be much better at making Lightsworn boards than Metaphys ones. As a result, I turned to my favorite Needlebug Banisher, Necrophys. Necrophys should allow us to banish a few Metaphys from the top of our deck, which is usually way more than enough to get the ball rolling. In order to effectively find Necrophys, we are also playing about 1,000 ways to Gold Sark her, and if that doesn't work, we can always use our Worm Searchers to find a Ragnarok and attempt a similar, albeit slightly less explosive line with him. So, let's get into the card by card. First, we're playing our Metaphys Men, 3 copies of Tyrant Dragon. This guy is unaffected by traps if he was special summoned by the effect of a Metaphys monster and can attack monsters twice the turn after it was banished. This card can self-shuffle to special a Metaphys from your hand. Next is 3 Metaphys Nephthys. Try saying that 5 times fast. This card can banish all set spells and traps if it was summoned by the effect of a Metaphys, and the turn after it was banished, it can self-shuffle to add a Metaphys from your deck to your hand. Very important. 3 copies of Daedalus. This card, when summoned, can banish all special summon monsters on the field, and the turn after it was banished can self-shuffle to banish another Metaphys from deck. Finally, my favorite, 3 copies of Ragnarok. This one's a little bit different. Think of it as the Cosmo farm girl of the archetype. When it's normal or special, you get to banish 3 cards from the top of your deck. It gains 300 attack for each Metaphys card that you hit, and after that, it deals battle damage to your opponent. You can special summon a level 5 or higher Metaphys from your deck, but banish it during the next end phase. Rounding out our lineup is 3 Light Ray Grepher, just to unbrick bad all monster openers, and of course, 2 copies of Necrophys. Next are our spells. 3 copies of Metaphys Factor, which allows you to summon a level 5 or higher Metaphys without tributing and then banishes it next end step, and prevents your opponent from chaining to your Metaphys effects. 3 copies of Terraforming to find that card. 3 copies of Gold Sark to get Necro. 3 copies of Left Arm to, find Gold Sark. This card also has the added bonus of removing all the random Metaphyses that you'll accidentally draw into from your hand and allowing you to get their good effects later. After that, we are playing the Peace Day Resistance, 3 copies of Card of Sanctity. Now, this card is actually not terrible. Honestly, if you draw a hand of all Metaphyses, you would prefer them to be banished instead of clunking around in your hand. Since the deck rebuilds at odd times as well, you can make your own board, then special on your opponents with banished Tyrants. After that, we have Dim Fizz and Macro, sweet cards for the deck, obviously. And finally, 3 copies of Metaphys Dimension, who specials a banished Metaphys when your opponent specials a monster, and allows you to banish a card when a Metaphys returns to the Banished Zone. The final trap, 3 copies of Ethereal Worm Turfall, is slow and bad, but it is a searcher and does help you Magical Mallet in the unlikely scenario that you draw into a whole bunch of Metaphyses and nothing else. This one probably isn't great. In the extra, we've got a 12-star and 2 8-stars because of our 4-star tuners. Our Xyz monsters include an enormous but unnecessary 8 suite, Hope Harbinger, Galaxy Eyes, Full Armor, and Cypher. We've got 7s, Red Eyes and Big Eyes, then 4s, Castel, the Utopia Boys, Tomato Dragon, Abyss Dweller, and Ga Ga Ga. So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first match is up against rank 4 spam, just a classic build of this deck, playing Gigabytes and Nefarious Archfiend, eater of both players' time. We've opened okay, we have a Gold Sark getting a Necrophase, which will basically determine the entire outcome of the game. This Grepher might need to be summoned as a blocker just so our opponent doesn't accidentally kill us. We're going to go ahead and on our turn immediately fire off this Gold Sark, praying to hit something off the Necrophase, and our prayers are answered. We hit, I believe, a Daedalus and a Tyrant Dragon. So that means we're not really going to summon the Grepher. This Tyrant Dragon will be able to summon the Nephthys in our hand, and we'll tag out our Daedalus for a Nephthys for a better setup our next standby phase. We're also going to flip up this copy of Metaphys Dimension just in case. They're going to get a Trick Clown off this Summoner Monk, go into King of the Feral Imps, go into Gigabyte, use Trick Clown to get Trick Clown back, special summon Gigabyte, just classic here, and then walk over a Gamciel they have kindly donated to us and get in for 1500. So that's not the lethal attack that I was expecting. We're going to use Wormterfall to get Ragnarok and then use Nephthys to get the field spell, and really, if we hit one card with Ragnarok, we might win. We do. He goes to 18, so we get to attack over Gigabyte, trigger his effect for Tyrant Dragon, and immediately after doing this, I realize it's not as good as it looks, but still it does get Performance Trick Clown out of our hair, and the setups in Banish are good enough that I think we'll win on their standby phase. So in their standby, I'm going to trigger our Tyrant Dragon that is now banished in order to special summon the Daedalus that is in our hand. I'll trigger Daedalus's effect to banish all special summon monsters, including one of our own Tyrant Dragons. Because a Tyrant Dragon Metaphys was banished, this triggers Metaphys Dimension and allows us to banish the set card, which of course is a Solemn Warning, and they'll concede. Our second match is up against Necroz, a deck that I've heard bricks a lot more than it used to. We've opened really well. We have a copy of Terraforming to find the field spell and normal summon the Nephthys, a copy of Gold Sark to banish a Necrophase, and I hear Macrocosmos is pretty good. So we'll go ahead and do that play, of course using Terraforming first in case you get incredibly unlucky on this Gold Sarcophagus. Thankfully we do not, and we hit two copies of Metaphys cards, I believe the exact same two, a Daedalus and a Tyrant Dragon. Similarly to last game, our Nephthys is not long for this world because they drew a Gamciel. They chain a Maxi to our Macrocosmos, I guess assuming that we're going to summon Helios the Primordial Sun. Afterwards, we will tag out for Nephthys and Grave for better setups. They'll use a Senju in order to get a Bryo, which they'll immediately send for Gungnir, and then they will pass back to us. Now, we are effectively in the driver's seat for the rest of this game. The two Nephthys activations allow us to get a Ragnarok and the Trap. That means we can use the Ragnarok's effect, make him go to 18, attack over the 1400 monster, use his other effect to get Tyrant Dragon, attack for 29, and attack for 22. The fact that the Trap exists means that once we flip it up, we'll be able to special summon from our grave if our opponent amasses the necessary materials in order to make a ritual monster, and noticing this, our opponent concedes. Our last match is up against Chaos Lightsworn Dragons, a pretty interesting take on this deck. It's got Brilliant Fusions and Predaplant Orpheus Scorpio, using the dark monsters to make a Dante, I believe, in order to get both a dark and a light in graveyard consistently. We've opened really well for on the play, but unfortunately we are on the draw, and as a result, cards like this Macrocosmos are unlikely to do a whole lot for us if we are already dead. Our opponent is going to fire off this Brilliant Fusion immediately, getting Trick Clown and Seraphonite, use Trick Clown's effect to special summon itself, and then use Seraphonite's extra normal summon to get a Scorpio. They're going to discard an Obsidian to special summon the Darlington Cobra, then get both effects, a Metalfoes Fusion off of the Cobra and a Gemini Garnet from Grave off of the Obsidian. They'll use Brilliant Fusion's effect in order to give Seraphonite 2300 attack, which puts Metalfoes Fusion in Grave. Then they'll go into a Dante, milling 3. They shuffle the Metalfoes Fusion back, draw into a Lost Wind, and make an Abyss Dweller. So this is a pretty good open. Thankfully, we don't actually, suck under Abyss Dweller at all. We'll go ahead and left arm offering ourselves into a Gold Sarcophagus, just praying that this Necrophase is going to be enough. I figure being on the Macrocosmos plan is just not good enough, especially when their onboard Dante beats over our only defensive threat. I'm going to use Daedalus to swap back into a Nephthys. Unfortunately, I didn't get very good mills, and they will hit an Eclipse Wyvern, go into a Light Pulsar, use Eclipse Wyvern's effect, go into another Trick Clown, use Snow's effect in order to make another rank 4, and from here on out, we're just about dead. The Tsukiyomi is the icing on the cake. We'll get beat up by Lyra, beat up by Abyss Dweller, beat up by Tsukiyomi, beat up by Light Pulsar, and beat up by Dante for game. So we're back with the deck. It's not there yet. It's not bad, it's got a lot of game, and it's got a bunch of cool combos, but until we see what new support is released in the coming days, I think it's probably premature to call this one bad just yet. I especially like the similarities to Ritual Beast. A lot of the opens just wind up being good by virtue of having Dimphis or Macro in opener, and I can only hope that Konami comes to their collective senses and puts both at 3 again. Please. But for now, these cards probably aren't enough to make this a consistent meta threat. We'll see if that changes, but as of now, it's a no from me, dog. So that's that. I look forward to making 18 more Metaphys videos as individual support cards come trickling out in the coming weeks. If you want to see me play the decks I make on this show on stream, I'm on twitch.tv/monobluetron every Monday and Wednesday from 10 to noon. Links are in the description. And if you have an idea for a certain deck or archetype, let me know in the comments section below, and I will do my best to accommodate you. Otherwise, I'll see you Sunday.